It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, Sunday is fast approaching. How are we doing on this fabulous Thursday?
I'm doing good. You know, it was coordinator day. It's Thursday. We took another field trip back to Acrisure Stadium. Didn't do the box lunch. We promised a box lunch, and instead they just had food set out for us there at the stadium, which is fine. The Steelers take great care of us in terms of food and drink, and Chef Kevin from Parkhurst and the staff do an awesome job. So I'm not complaining. But I did have my hopes up for like an Uncrustable and an apple and a bag of Lay's potato chips. Like, I don't know. I kind of would have hit a little different. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, one of those, it's like a nostalgia thing, right? Like, it's obviously not a great meal.
But day, but once in a while, that could be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, this game, although some say that it might not be, will still take place in Buffalo. What the heck was that about?
I don't know. There was a report from, I believe it was Marty Griffin of KDK Radio today that said that there were talks that the league was thinking about moving this game to Cleveland in case there's a state of emergency in Buffalo. And here's the thing that I need to say first of all. Do you know how much snow they have to get in Buffalo to declare a state of emergency? I mean, we are talking multiple feet before people in Buffalo are even concerned about it, right? It's so funny. If you go onto the website of one of the Pittsburgh TV stations, when we're forecast to get an inch of snow, there's red banners across the top of the page and Armageddon is coming, 1 inch of snow forecast for Pittsburgh. Go look at the Buffalo TV station websites right now. It's all it was a traffic accident, and city council said they're not even moderately concerned about the weather for this weekend in Buffalo. No one is really out. It's just not. They're nonplussed by the chance of there being some wind and some snow. And so the idea that the Buffalo was going to declare a state of emergency and then they're just going to have to move the game, that's kind of unrealistic to begin with. But then you have the I don't know where this idea that they could move the game to Cleveland came from, but told it's not true by the Steelers, and so I guess we'll continue our travel plans to Buffalo.
Yeah, even people on the national level, Jonathan Jones, who's with CBS, he also put out that multiple sources have told him there's no truth to the rumor about it potentially being moved to Cleveland due to weather concerns. Somebody in the replies, because it was Pony that put out the thing from Marty Griffin, per Marty Griffin about that, and somebody mentioned oh, that's not going to happen. And somebody said in the past they've moved it, and it was a time where they got 8 feet of snow in Buffalo that the game moved. This isn't something that they just do every time they get any type of inclement weather.
8 feet of snow would move the game. Yes, I agree with that. I will agree. But here's the thing, I don't even think it would be if it's going to snow 8 feet in Buffalo, how much is it going to snow in Cleveland? You're not solving any problems. It's not like Cleveland doesn't get lake effect snow.
Sure.
If they're going to move and the other thing is, do the Browns really want people playing on their grass field in a snowstorm when Cleveland could still play a home game in these playoffs? I doubt Cleveland would be even super interested in that. If they're going to move this game, they're going to move it to somewhere inside Indianapolis or Minnesota or or maybe to New York, right? But it's not. They're not going to play in Cleveland if they wouldn't play in Buffalo. That's just crazy.
Yeah, no, that's very sound logic. That makes a ton of sense, which is why it wasn't put out that way. Alan, I think we have to kind of go along with yesterday, just a little quick rundown of the injury report as we have to do. The only DNP is TJ Watt, who's already been rolled out for this game with his knee injury. Limited practice for Cam Hayward, who's just, resting as he does throughout each week. But full participation from Najee, Minkah, Elandon Roberts, and Isaac Seumalo, which is good to see, kind of on track with what we believe we're going to see on Sunday. So kind of status quo, I would say, more than anything else with those guys getting back to full participation.
Got some breaking news for the podcast here. Today,
Okay.
I saw TJ Watt carrying a knee brace.
Mm.
It's big. It's big.
Okay.
I mean, he's not playing this week, but
right.
I think if he's already let me see how this feels with a knee brace phase, I think it does give some credence to the hey, if they keep winning, TJ could come back. Kind of mindset. I mean, look, they've got a tough game here in Buffalo we don't give our predictions till Friday on this podcast, but I'm not sure it's much of a secret that I don't expect them to win this game. But look, if they can win, I think you start to open the door for a TJ Watt return. So the fact that he's already trying out knee braces, I think in my mind anyway, that it kind of moves up the time frame a little bit, right?
Yeah, like I was going to say, are we talking divisional round as opposed to AFC Championship game with a knee brace?
We're talking the crazy guy is probably going to try to play next week if they play. I'm skeptical that the Steelers would let him, but he might try.
Hey, I mean, Elandon Roberts, a nutcase for playing right now as well. So, maybe they just got a bunch of nutcases on this team that are going to be playing in situations that they probably shouldn't be.
The difference is that the Steelers' entire 2024 season is not resting on Elandon Roberts.
Yeah, true.
I love Erod, but he is a far more fungible asset to the team. If he goes out there and tears the puck off his bone trying to play through some crazy stuff, everyone's gonna be like, dang, that sucks. Anyway, and so a little different if the Steelers do something with TJ Watt and he blows out his knee and then misses all of next season. Very different conversation if that happens.
Sure. Yeah. Short term, they both suck. Long term, one is much more devastating to the franchise. Alan, before we move on and talk more Steelers stuff, one thing we do, I feel have to mention, although it's not Steelers related at all, Bill Belichick and the Patriots parting ways.
He didn't wait for the podcast recording to break his news like Nick Saban did.
Yeah.
So I can't react to it in real time. Of course, Bill Belichick sticks it to the media one more time, very much in his persona there. Also, that was hilarious. And they called a press conference today with him and Robert Kraft, and then they didn't take any questions. Just an absolute masterclass in Bill Belichick being Bill Belichick to call a press conference and then not take any questions. That's one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
The one time where I felt like we were seeing I don't know if I'd say different side, at least something that I've never seen. Maybe if I went and searching for it, there's other instances of it. You can hear his voice cracking a little bit, talking about the fan base and missing those memories and the parades that they've thrown, seeing even fans internationally when they played in Germany this year, talking about the fans. You could tell got him a little bit emotional, and it was a different side of Bill than at least I've seen.
He is human. Or at least part human. Maybe he's a cyborg, but at least he's part human. And I think that was good to see. Mm-hmm. I'm very curious as to what happens with Bill Belichick. I don't, they're painting this as an amicable split, and good for them for that. But he didn't say he's retiring. I think he's going to coach again. I think he's going to coach again in the NFL next season. I think there are enough spots out there that somebody's going to talk themselves into making him their head coach. And I don't really know whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's pretty clear that the Bill Belichick as general manager, director of player personnel, and head coach is a bad idea. But look at the failure rate of NFL head coaches. The chances that he ends up better. Well, let's say this. There's 5 head coach openings right now? Where do you think Bill Belichick, if somebody hired him right now, would end up ranking of those in 3 years? two or three of these coaches that get hired 5 years from now, people are going to look back and be like, what were they thinking? Just
yeah.
like right now, we look back at the head coach hires of 3 to 5 years ago and think that. I mean, the NFL is littered with head coaching hire failures. I don't know. I think somebody's going to talk themselves into it.
I agree. I know that it's been widely talked about as Atlanta, who have a GM in place already in Terry Fontenot, who I kind of like the early returns and what he's trying to do there. Obviously, very early in the process for him. He's only been there a couple seasons. But so I don't think he has like his fingerprints fully on that roster yet at this point. I think that could be interesting. I also think it's interesting that it was put out there that there's a team that's potentially still playing that would think about making a move in order to bring him in. And that just screams Dallas, doesn't it? Like if the Packers upset the Cowboys, could they move on from Mike McCarthy? And could you imagine the Jones family and Bill Belichick working together?
I mean, I can imagine Jerry Jones and Bill Belichick working together. They're both very old school football guys. I think they could work together. It's like, oh, well, we don't have a general manager. We have a head coach and an owner, and there's no one in between. But that's the same relationship that Belichick had with Kraft. But in Dallas, it would be with Jerry still pulling a lot of the strings. I think that's actually a good fit for him if Jerry's crazy enough to fire Mike McCarthy, which I don't think would be a good decision. I think Mike McCarthy's a good coach. I think he's been good for the Cowboys, but man, that'd be crazy. I can see it happening, though. I can see him fitting there. The place that I really think is a good fit for him is in Los Angeles. I really think if I'm that team with that quarterback, I think someone like Bill Belichick becomes extremely attractive.
Yeah, I mean, that's from Bill's side, that's what I would like to have in place, right? Is like you not having to find that solution already. Like if you go to LA, you got Justin Herbert in place. If I mentioned Dallas, obviously that's a very talented roster that he'd be taken over from the jump. Like it's not, you're not talking about having to rebuild this thing, strip it down to the studs and then rebuild it. Like where New England with a very I'm not going to say talentless, but a roster that is depleted and needs a lot of injection into that roster. Like you're not talking about that type of situation with either of those two. So
yeah, well, and the other part of that is why is the New England roster talentless? We all want to know who's causing this. Bill Belichick's bad drafting is why the New England roster is talentless. And so I don't know why, if you're a team in the middle of a rebuild, you would want to sign up for Bill Belichick running it. But I can really understand if you're the Chargers and you're like, hey, we have a good team, we have a lot of talent, we can't figure out why it's not working for us. Man, I think that's an attractive option.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Anything else of that note before we move on? Because I want to touch on you talked to the coordinators today, and that's where I want to go next. But anything else on Bill?
Good stuff from Elandon Roberts today. Credited Belichick for kind of saving his career, and Roberts was a guy who was a little bit underrated coming out of college, I think, compared to the player that he became. And so it was good talk. It was talk about your old coach day on the South Side, because we talked to Elandon Roberts about Bill Belichick, and then we talked to Minkah Fitzpatrick and Najee Harris today. And so, of course, Nick Saban came up. Najee with a really good story about how Nick Saban's wife came to visit his mom when she was sick and in the hospital, and just about the off-the-field impact that he feels that Nick Saban has made. That's one video up here on the YouTube channel, so go make sure you check that out. Minkah said he was very surprised by that news. Najee Harris said that Nick Saban actually told him 2 years ago that he was going to retire soon, and Najee didn't really believe him.
Oh, wow.
So I guess he wasn't lying about that when he told Najee. And so interesting stuff from those guys. Always cool to hear, players talk about coaches that have been impactful in their lives and their careers in that way. And so one of the parts of my job I really enjoy doing. Good stuff on that front today.
I wanted to ask you if either of those guys, because obviously playing under Saban in college and now playing under Tomlin, I'm sure they've been asked this a lot. Actually, I've asked Minkah this when he was on our show before, was like if there was any similarities that they could define between playing under Tomlin and playing under Coach Saban.
Yeah, I think you're not going to get those guys are too good at this media game to play the comparison very often. E-Rob has said in the past, I don't compare coaches. They're successful, and I think the biggest thread that I've gotten from talking to people about what makes those guys tick is, I really don't think there are a lot of similarities between Mike Tomlin and Bill Belichick in terms of the way they approach their job. I think the thing that you see, I think maybe there are probably more similarities between Tomlin and Saban, but I think the thing you see that guys, like the reason that guys gravitate to those places and the reason they have success is the dedication to the craft. And that's why you see guys that are 72 years old and they retire or they leave their job and people are surprised. And people are like, oh my God, how are I can't imagine the New England Patriots without Bill Belichick. Elandon Roberts said Tom Brady won his first Super Bowl when he was 2. Elandon Roberts is now one of the oldest guys in the Steelers locker room. Like, when you have people doing that job for that long, they have to be extremely dedicated to it. And I think that's probably the one thing that I've picked up as a common thread between guys like that. But it's a very different approach between a guy like Belichick and even a guy like Saban, who are friends, who coach together in Cleveland. And so, imagine only the Browns could have Bill Belichick and Nick Saban on their coaching staff and not win, right? Just absolute kick in the pants to that franchise that they somehow came through that scenario.
I did want this just like I remember when we had Minkah on, one thing that popped in my mind I wanted to bring up, because unless it's somebody else has scored differently since then, every player that goes to Alabama, they take like a test to see how similar they are to Coach Saban. And Minkah was basically the exact same person on this test. And it's like based off like how analytical you are and just like all these phases. And he was the most similar player in Alabama history under Nick Saban to Nick Saban.
They called him the guys on the team called him the coach's son. Yeah. And because they're so similar to the point, and it just became so ubiquitous that there was a point where someone, I guess, at some point had to be cleared up on the fact that Minkah Fitzpatrick was not actually Nick Saban's son. That there was at some point some discrepancy in the record for someone who had just heard him always referred to as the coach's son, that he was not Nick Saban's son. Very similar guys, very similar approach to the game. I think what separates Minkah Fitzpatrick is that he's an elite athlete that also attacks the game intellectually at a high level. I could totally see Minkah Fitzpatrick being a coach. I really could. I think that's look, he's going to make a lot of money as an NFL player. He's probably not going to need to do it. But if he wants to, I think he could be a pretty good one. And I think, his similarity to and his experience learning from Nick Saban really goes a long way there.
Yeah. So along with talking to the players today, Alan, also the coordinators speaking today, what did we hear from them in terms of their approach towards Buffalo, attacking this weather, like everything that they're challenged with this week?
Well, I just got to take a total sidebar. There is a truck next to me on the road right now with a Buffalo Bills bumper sticker. So, to go back to our, they are out there. They are out there. They are out there.
That doesn't come for Steelers afternoon drive. That's a Bills afternoon drive thing. I don't know if that show exists, but
I know. Just going back to our conversation about disliking Bills fans. They do exist in your community. Beware. Actually, it's funny. A friend of mine from elementary school grew up a Bills fan in Pittsburgh. I don't know how that happens, but it does happen.
Interesting.
So there is a strange. We talked about the level of confidence in the Steelers fan base about this game and how I wasn't necessarily thinking that it made a lot of sense. And we talked yesterday about what are the reasons for it? And I do think there are a bunch of threads that you can pull on if you're a Steelers fan to give you some confidence in this game. The people in this locker room are confident too. It's really my big takeaway from today. Najee talked about hey, we see things on film that we think we can exploit. And that's a fairly bold statement when you're talking about what is a very good Buffalo Bills team. I get the sense that they have a game plan that they are confident in. I asked Najee, someone else asked Najee a few weeks ago after the Steelers went, maybe it was before the Ravens game, about the Steelers' record in the division and why that had been so good in the division. And Najee said, we feel confident when these teams that we play all the time, Mike Tomlin has the game plan, has the blueprint to beat them. And I asked him, look, the Steelers will have now played Buffalo, including the preseason, 6 times in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Is that enough familiarity to unlock some of those secrets? And he basically said yes. We feel comfortable, confident in our game plan. He said he is more confident going into this game right now than he was in playing the Chiefs with Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback in 2021. So I guess if you're one of those Steelers fans that was optimistic, maybe those feelings are being validated. I don't know. I'm still going to be skeptical, I think, but it's noteworthy to me. That's for sure.
I was just saying, so how much of that is just confidence because you have to be I could you gauge that though? Does it feels genuine to you?
It's more than the normal level of confidence that every athlete has in their own abilities. I think especially when you specifically start talking about hey, look, we have a game plan and we think it's a good one.
Yeah.
That's not a sentence you're hearing every week. That's something that you're hearing.
I guess.
My reporter ears go up when I hear that. Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's unusual to say. I'm more confident now than I was 2 years ago. To me, that's a pretty bold statement. And Najee Harris is not a player that is prone to them. I wouldn't think, And so I just think it's noteworthy. I don't know that it means anything, but it is noteworthy.
So we've talked about obviously now it doesn't matter because it's hindsight in terms of the team that they are going to match up with. But from your perspective, then, do they almost feel better about matching up with this Bills team because of how many times they've played them than a Kansas City or a Miami? Obviously, Miami wasn't possible going into that last game, but heading into this past weekend, it was.
Yeah, you're never going to get anybody to answer that question honestly because of the bulletin board factor, right? Yeah. But given that, and also just as a total reporter sidebar here, I asked that question at the very end of Najee's press conference today, and the question before had been about the Steelers recovering from having a 4% chance of making the playoffs or whatever. And Najee took issue with that question. He did not like that question. The premise of the play, that stuff doesn't matter. Why are you even asking me about that? And I asked that question. He was like, "That's a really good question." And then he went on to say we do feel comfortable because we've played them enough. So I kind of think that if you fed some people some truth serum, that there are people in that locker room that did want to see the Bills, that they felt like they could come up with a game plan to beat the Bills.
Now, was he the only player? Because you've mentioned there's a sense of optimism in the entire room, but it was really Najee that said this. So was he the only one that actually was asked about this matchup specifically and said that sentiment? Or
yeah, I kind of because it was Najee that had said that about the divisional success. I very specifically wanted to ask Najee that question. I didn't ask it to anybody else. It didn't seem like anybody else was on that wavelength with me. The Minkah, was asked about Josh Allen, and complimentary, of course, but I did just get a sense of confidence, and Minkah's a confident guy all the time, always. I'm not saying that they aren't, but I just, when you talk to somebody and you feel like they've got something up their sleeve, that's what I feel about.
They're passing the vibes check right now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It just feels like they got something going on. I'm not saying we're going to give a prediction tomorrow. I'm going to give a spoiler. I'm probably not going to pick them to win. But, there's just something about this team that is different. Let's just say
you can see the rosters. You can see what the weather forecast looks like. You can see what the spread looks like. You can't see vibes, Alan. You got to just feel them.
You can't see vibes. You got to feel them. That's right. Taking the temperature of the room is an important part of my job, and the temperature of the room is confident, I think, and it's noteworthy.
Like, that's all I could ask for.
Coordinators, of course, are not going to give away confidence, but I feel like we learned a lot talking to Eddie and TA today. And I brought up a stat. I actually slightly misstated it in my question to Eddie. I will apologize for that at some point later. But Najee Harris has 6 career 100-yard carry, or 100-yard games.
Okay.
Of those 6 games, 3 of the 6 have been in January. One of the 6 was last week in a December rainstorm, and the other was in a November rainstorm in the tie against the Lions in 2021. Basically, Najee Harris loves playing in this junk. And we talked about this a little bit earlier this week, but I asked Eddie, like, what is it about him? And, he basically said, this is why we wanted this guy. Big backs, they hold up over the course of the year, and they're unbothered by the conditions. When you have a little guy who needs to scat around and, who has to make cuts, who has to make people miss to be successful, when you put them in bad weather conditions, they aren't going to be. And that's he said that's one of the reasons they wanted Najee Harris, was that he was an all-weather back. Like, it was like getting it. The Steelers went out and they were like, I'm tired of changing the snow tires. I want me a set of all-season radials right here. And they went out and got it with Najee Harris. And I think that's an interesting way to approach the position, especially if you happen to play in Pittsburgh in the AFC North, that I'm not sure I would have considered before.
Yeah, me either. I mean, that's interesting for sure. It's like we know that teams look at their own roster, look at their division, and it could play into their roster building for sure. But like that is very interesting to actually hear them say that out loud. Like, we wanted this guy specifically because we think about the way he's going to hold up long term. What you've mentioned, we've talked about on here. Like, he gets better as not only as games go on, but as seasons go on. Yeah, very interesting stuff there.
So interesting confluence then of us breaking down Najee Harris's stats, and then I didn't include. What's interesting? I didn't include that Kansas City game. They didn't do anything on offense, so I'm assuming his statistics weren't very good in that one. But
playoffs?
Yeah, that playoff game in 21. So it was cold then. It didn't snow, but it was cold in Kansas City then. But I don't think he had a very good game, just based on my memory of it. But yeah, I mean, I think the success in January in his career, and they don't play that many games in January. You play what, 2 a year?
Real quick, he had in that playoff game 12 carries for 29 yards, 2 receptions for -1. Also fumbled in that game.
Yeah, I didn't think it was good. And part of that was that after the first quarter, the Steelers were trailing pretty big the rest of the way and needed to throw the ball. But not great. Just, I don't know, interesting all around there. Other stuff from Eddie. I want to write a story about Mason Rudolph this week and the way he's really done a very good job of taking risks without throwing interceptions. And Eddie kind of made the point that he's actually not really taking risks because of the way they've been able to get explosive plays from short passes. And how, like, the throw to Deontay Johnson, he's like, that's a short pass. Like, it's just a big play. And when you can do that, then you can take fewer risks. It's not that they are afraid to. It's that they haven't had to because they've gotten big plays out of short passes. And that's what's really set up a lot of their success, is that they've just been able to do, really good things in the throw it short and run it long game. And really, when you think about it, there was that big play down the sideline to Pickens against the Bengals that wasn't a touchdown, and then there was the one that was a touchdown. But really, these last 2 games, the passing game has been short passes, and they've still gotten big plays anyway. If you're worried about the conditions in this game, I think the Steelers' passing offense if you can go 18-20 in a monsoon at 30 degrees in Baltimore, then you can do that in the wind in Buffalo too. Like, it seems like the things that they're doing are going to be able to carry over to the conditions that are going to be on the field on Sunday.
Yeah, there's a lot of translatable things that they're doing offensively that are going to work in any conditions, for sure. And that's again why I'm saying, like, I like you. I don't want to give away my prediction yet, but there's a path. There's a path here. They got a blueprint for the way that they could walk out of this game with a victory.
Are you feeling more optimistic about this game as the week goes on?
I feel like I felt the same.
We learn. Okay.
Because I wasn't giving them no chance to begin with. Like, I was kind of on the boat. Like, I think that there is a path here, which I'm still on. So,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know that.
I'm feeling more optimistic about their chances as the week goes on. I'm not feeling good about those, but I think I'm buying some of what the Steelers are selling in some of these instances. Real quick, because 30 minutes already. Flipping to defense. Interesting conversation with TA about Gabe Davis and how much he means to this offense, and whether he'll play or not. I think will be a big storyline to watch over the next 48 hours. I didn't see the Buffalo injury report came out just before we started recording. I didn't see if he practiced today.
He did not. And actually, Stephon Diggs had a quote about wanting to win for him. So he can, Bills are trying to win for Gabe Davis so he has something to play for when he comes back.
Okay. So doesn't seem like Buffalo's getting Gabe Davis. It's interesting to me because most of the time when you have a superstar wide receiver, that guy is the big play guy, and the other receiver is like your possession receiver, right? Like that's sort of the traditional archetype. And the Bills kind of flip that on their head, right? I mean, Stephon Diggs is basically just the world's best possession receiver, and Gabe Davis is the home run hitter. So I think it really takes something. Normally, if a team loses its number 2 wide receiver, you go, well, they still have Stephon Diggs. I do think it kind of takes something away from the Buffalo offense to play without Gabe Davis that most teams would not feel if they lost their number 2 wide receiver.
Yeah, and it's a lot of, because I know there's times where the box store will look a little empty for him, but his ability to just take that top off and leave things underneath for Stephon Diggs, the attention that he would be taking away that isn't going to be taken away if he's not on the field. Yeah, I mean, you're asking a lot in an elevated role for like a Khalil Shakir or Trenton Sherfield, like guys like that. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid, more of a receiver than an inline tight end as well. But yeah, I mean, no Gabe Davis would be massive for that Buffalo offense.
Yeah, so I talked to him about that, some other stuff about Kincaid, and about just the way the Bills have been a different offense since firing Ken Dorsey. Maybe we can get into more of that when we break down the X's and O's tomorrow. But, man, time flies.
Time does fly. Real quick, I did want to just say, too, I was going through some of these just to get a gauge on, because you wanted to know when people are watching or listening to the show, and very different answers. Sometimes late at night after 11. John says 4:30 a.m. from Tampa. Frankenstein says between 5 and 8 p.m. Appreciate you listening, Frankenstein. Randy says 8 p.m. here. Steeler Wade Show, who's been a very loyal listener, watcher of the show, says 5 says 5 right when I see it pop up. So yeah, a lot of different times here people are watching and listening to the show, which we appreciate. That 4:30 a.m. in Tampa, man, that's a
wild one. Yeah, when we set out to do this, one of the things I thought was that a lot of podcasts get posted in the morning, which means that they are very detached from the day's news. And I wanted to do something where we could react more immediately to what happened today. And I'm glad that works for people, that people are able to listen in the evening, and they're not just listening tomorrow morning anyway, because then there'd be no point of me doing this on my drive home, so that we could get this podcast out to the people. So anyway, thanks. I appreciate the feedback, and wanted to know that as we move into the off season here, what we should be doing.
Sure. All right. Well, Alan, tell the people where they could find you.
In traffic on Route 30. At @Saunders_PGH on Twitter. PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. Like and subscribe to YouTube channel. And we'll see you in Buffalo.
Yeah, if you are not already, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit us in the comments. 50 to 60% of the people, Alan, I don't know if you're aware of this, 50 to 60% of the people that consume the content on this channel are not currently subscribed to the channel. It is absolutely free to subscribe to the channel, so please do so. Leave us a like, hit that notification bell so you know when a new episode of this is posted, a new episode of Pregame Scout is posted, all the clips from guys talking in the locker room, all that good stuff, all the content on the channel. If you're listening somewhere else, leave us a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever that might be. For Alan Saunders and myself, Zachary Smith, PGH, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.